Hello, this is Angelia, and you're watching the podcast or listening to it, Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. We were talking about family studies, and we're going to take back up on that. And abnormal behavior could be either passed on genetically or taught by example, usually unintentionally. And that might not always be the case. There's some ignorant folks who intentionally teach their children how to be ignorant as part of the socialization process. More impressive evidence has been collected from studies of very close family members, twin siblings. Twin studies. Researchers have studied pairs of twins, both monozygotic or identical from a single egg, and dizygotic, or fraternal, from two different eggs. The object is to determine two things. Number one, the concordance rate, the percentage of twin pairs in which both twins have the same mental disorder. And number two, the discordance rate, the percentage of twin pairs in which one twin is deviant but the other is not. So, that's an easy way to figure out if there's some sort of physical attribute here is to look at twins. These studies have shown that the concordance rate for schizophrenia among monozygotic twins is from 3 to 6 times higher than it is for dizygotic twins. So there might be something to that, huh? In addition, the concordance rate for dizygotic twins is no higher than for regular siblings. If the genetic explanation is valid, we would naturally expect a 100% concordance rate among identical twins who inherited the very same gene material. This is not the case, but we cannot reject the genetic theory altogether because there is evidence indicating that it does make a fairly substantial difference. So like I say, even twins are genetically different. No two people are exactly the same. We're just like snowflakes, and get over that if you think that's a bad word. But we're different, and even twins are not perfectly the same and do not inherit the same genetics as each other do. Adoption studies. Perhaps the strongest evidence for the importance of genetic factors comes from the studies of children born to deviant people who were at birth or shortly thereafter adopted by psychologically more healthy parents. In one comparison, a control group of adopted children born to normal mothers was matched with children of schizophrenic mothers. The results: 5 members of the schizophrenic mother group were themselves diagnosed as schizophrenic. So there you go. That shows that there is a genetic factor. None of the control group was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So even if you had an adopted parent or someone took care of you who had schizophrenic behaviors, that doesn't mean you could learn them. It's not a nurture thing. Now you could learn some bad behaviors, some bad coping mechanisms, some dysfunctional, ways of life, but you cannot inherit it unless it's genetically there. There's a genetic predisposition. Similar findings have been reported by other investigators. Indeed, David Rosenthal, one of the authorities on the genetics of psychopathology, has stated that the evidence so strongly reinforces the probability of a genetic contribution to schizophrenia that such a view that genetic factors are unimportant no longer seems tenable. So he's saying, with all this evidence now, there's no way you can't say that it's not inherited. On one level, heredity explains they're attractive in their simplicity. They suggest that some kind of completely internal mechanism underlies the behavior, so no additional reasons need to be offered. And of course, that's Not necessarily the case. But what exactly is inherited? Our current understanding of genetics is very incomplete, and we do not know if the genes pass on complex behavior patterns, both normal and abnormal, or if they pass on a brain defect, or if even the disease itself is a latent form of a disorder, indeed a disease. So we know some of the stuff, we don't know all of the stuff, and that's why they're still studying these things. And that's why it's important that they still study these things. So, all these folks who are taking funding away from labs, who are studying things that can help mankind, stop. Get over yourself, because this is going to be helpful to people. And it might be your children or your grandchildren who need this help. Most geneticists doubt that complex behavior patterns are inherited. However, such patterns are thought to emerge slowly as the person develops in response to the environment. So if you were with me before when we were studying child development, you know that it's not just a nature or nurture, it's both. And so you might have a genetic predisposition to a certain thing, and if you come up in a bad environment, that might trigger that to become a thing. So, as you develop, you're learning from everything. And, there's the song, "Be careful, little hands, what you do." And then there's also a saying, it says, children learn what they live. They're watching, they're seeing everything, and if you're showing them bad things, they're going to learn bad things. So, But one strong possibility is that the factor transmitted by heredity is a biochemical flaw. So yes, if there are flaws in the DNA and you reproduce, you're passing that flaw on. So, as for people who are seriously against any medical interfering with the DNA, I'm just, for myself, if I had the gene for a certain disease, and I knew I could spare my child that horrible disease by fixing that gene, then I probably would do it. Now, like I said, I don't believe in designer babies. I don't believe you should be picking their eye color, hair color. I think that should be a nice surprise. But allowing them to have horrible disease and saying that's God's will, when God gave you the science to figure this out, I'm not down with that. Now, I don't think Jesus would be either. That's just my opinion. The biogenic view, biochemistry. The brain is an intricate and complex network of which electrical impulses are constantly being transmitted. You're firing in there, like a engine. It's going on. In order for these impulses to be conducted and therefore interpreted and acted upon, several different neurotransmitter substances are required. So there's a chemical aspect to it too. A lot of people, think it's just electrical. There's chemical aspects going on too. Just like other chemicals in your body, like in your digestive system, that's telling it what to do. Okay, we're going to take this and put it here or whatever. You have chemicals in your brain that are also telling the neurons and things what we're going to do. So if you didn't know that, now you know. Researchers once assumed that nerve impulses jump between neurons much the way electrical sparks jump. But now we know that these neurotransmitters, which are specialized biochemicals, move brain messages from neuron to neuron in the nervous system. So it's not as easy as, electricity jumping around. It's, moving messages. It's these chemicals are, telling things to these other ones, and it's a little more complicated than just you spark, and then when you don't spark anymore, you're gone. So a little more complicated than that. We're still learning about this neurotransmission process, But what we already know is fascinating, and I find it so. Hopefully you do too if you're watching this. Some neurotransmitters seem to carry only excitatory impulses. Others conduct only inhibitory messages. Still others carry both. So, one might be spurring you to do something, one might be telling you not to do something. And, some are kind of on the fence on that one. So, it's interesting what's going on in your brain. But we have yet to discover what makes a neurotransmitter either excitatory or inhibitory. So we know it's happening. We can tell it's happening by the studies, but we're not sure exactly why. And it all goes back to that DNA. It all goes back to the formation of a human being when that first spark of life happens. And like I said, it is so complex. People always want to make everything simple, but most things are not simple. But it's so complex. I don't see how people don't believe in a God. It's like, how would this even come about? This is so complicated and so, wonderfully, fearfully and wonderfully made is the saying in the Bible. How can you not believe that somebody was behind this? There's definitely intelligent design going on. Most theories about the role of biochemical influence on deviance have focused on this transmission process. So they're saying something is going on here that is causing deviant behavior. For instance, it has been proposed that the cause of schizophrenia is the production of an abnormal neurotransmitter substance in the brain. So they think that this something is telling the brain that this is how we're going to behave on. This is what we think, and it's a flaw. It's an abnormal transmitter, probably. Some people might want to call it a birth defect, even. That is inherited. So, they're trying to see if they can't come up with some treatment and some, way to fix that. Another hypothesis focuses on a class of neurotransmitters called catecholamines, which includes norepinephrine and dopamine. I'm sure we've all heard of those. These two neurotransmitters are spread irregularly throughout the brain. So they're not waiting to do anything. They're just kind of going around in there until something causes them to do something. Many drugs that cause hallucinations and other cognitive disturbances, such as LSD and mescaline, are chemically very similar to dopamine. So that's why they have a reaction on the brain. It is an easy step to then theorize that since these drugs cause similar symptoms, perhaps an imbalance in the system's natural chemical supply is producing abnormal mental states. So, that is something that they know now, and there's too many drugs really on the list there, but there are drugs now that can help people with these problems. There is some support for this argument. Many published reports assert that traces of specific hallucinatory chemicals have been found in the blood or urine of diagnosed schizophrenics. So, if that is something that runs in your family, know that it can be hereditary, and know that you definitely don't need to be doing drugs, because that's not going to help you out. That's only going to make things worse. Another line of research is a bit more promising. Many of the drugs used to control psychotic behavior, such as the irregular thought patterns of schizophrenia, are now known to block dopamine receptors. That is, the neurons that accept impulses carried by dopamine. So, we now know that, and like I say, research is not a bad thing. If you end up seeing a psychiatrist or your MD and they say, take this, psychoactive drug, just do it. Because they're doing it to help you, not to hurt you. And it might not make you feel like yourself. I was talking about that with a lady one day. It's like, everyone who needs to be on some antipsychotics says they don't like to take them because it makes them not feel like themselves, which is kind of the point, because yourself is exhibiting abhorrent behavior, we're trying to stop that. We're trying to lessen that so that you are a more average person. Later studies have shown that the effectiveness of antipsychotic drugs depends on their capacity to block dopamine receptivity in the brain. So, there's been lots of testing and finding what is effective and what works. These findings rather strongly support the idea that the neurotransmission process is an important factor in at least some disorders. Certainly not all of them. There's not all a physical neurotransmitter problem for every mental illness. Some are effective, so again, one size does not fit all when it comes to treatment for mental illness. This in turn has excited strong interest in studying the influence of other neurotransmitters on the different forms of behavioral deviance. Because, like I say, people like it easy. People like to classify, label, but life's never that easy. And everything is a little more complicated than people want it to be. The disease model, genetics, and biochemistry are currently the primary biogenic explanations. So all of these things can play a role. Not necessarily all of them do, but, they can. They are, as you can see, quite interrelated. You can't really look at one without having to look at the others. In fact, they cannot be viewed independently, excuse me, because they all operate within the human body, where every system interacts with, and sometimes even depends on, at least one other system. So, you can't take one piece and think this is all it is. My finger does not work by itself. My brain has to tell it to do this. It has to have the skeletal structure and muscular structure to do this. It has to have the nerve connections to do this. It has to have blood pumping to it in order for those things to work to do this. And then I have to have the will to say, yeah, I want it to do this. So, it all is interconnected. These explanations are clearly involved in the creation of abnormal behavior. They are nonetheless very important parts of our modern conception of how behavioral deviance develops. The psychogenic view, early theories. There is another side to the internal model, the psychogenic side. This centers on the idea that abnormal behavior is created by the mind, as an entity separate from the physiological brain. And so that would be your mental state, your psyche. Your brain is just a physical thing. It's just, sitting in there, doing its thing. It is not you. It is not your mental state. It is not your psychological state. It is a tool that your spirit uses to create a mental psychological state. And if it's defective, sometimes it can affect your mental psychological state. Although a few of the ancients believed that the psyche played an important role in behavioral deviance, it was not until this century that any complete theories were developed. So, they had some ideas back in the old Roman days and Greek days. They were working on it, and then, of course, the world went into the Dark Ages, and, everything was contributed to the evils and all that stuff, and, no science was being done. It's taken a while to get back to that, and hopefully we don't relapse into another dark age where, there's no scientific exploration, and everything is back to it's evil. So, because that's ignorant, again, like I said, I don't believe you have to separate the two. I believe God created science so we could learn this stuff and help people, and I believe maybe someday science is going to prove God exists. So, before that, however, a few individuals did formulate some rather intriguing ideas. Plato was an early advocate of a psychological foundation for deviant behavior, suggesting that moral factors influence the development of abnormal behavior. And I'll tell you what a geeky kid I was. I had a stuffed unicorn I named Plato. So even back in the day, I was kind of geeky. So but he was seeing that the way someone's brought up or the way they feel about their life can affect them morally and mentally. So he also felt the interaction between individuals and society was another important factor. And it does. The way other kids treat you in school affects you. The way teachers and then people you work with treat you, that affects you. You're not living in a vacuum, and you never will be. The Roman physician Galen asserted that there were clear psychological causes of deviance, such as unfulfilled love, or the poverty and loss of status and self-esteem resulting from unemployment. So even back, back in the day, the Romans and Greeks were like, I think this has something to do with this. And they were onto something. Both of these foreshadowed the interest in the mind that began to grow during the age of enlightenment, and that's what we need again. Let's have one of those again, please. We're going the wrong way. Mesmer and the Nancy School. One of the more unusual people to spur this interest in the mind was Frederick Anton Mesmer, an Austrian who worked in both Vienna and Paris. He was greatly influenced by Paracelsus's theory that the planets and stars affect human behavior. So he kind of thought, well, you know what? Lunatics, with the base word being lunar, does have something to do with this. So, expanding on this theme, he insisted that irregular shifting of a universal magnetic fluid, which he called animal magnetism, which, I mean, someone has taken that word and meant it to be someone's, attractiveness or whatever, so that got kind of skewed throughout the years, were responsible for how people felt. And that this magnetism was controlled by the astral bodies. So, he bought into the whole, astrology thing. Mesmer further believed that it was possible to intervene in this process by using a treatment he had perfected, known popularly as mesmerism. And if you watch any old movies about, that back in the day, basically, it was kind of like hypnotism, but he had his own little weird tweaks on it. This surprisingly successful treatment was said to be especially good for hysteria. And that's because really it would put the person into a relaxed state. When you go into hypnosis, you go into a sleep-like state. You're in relaxation. And that alone can calm you down, and cause you to be in a better mental place. Nevertheless, Mesmer was regarded as a charlatan by his medical colleagues and was forced into obscurity. Poor guy. He was on to something, but the way he did it, like a showman, that people are like, yeah, whatever, dude, you're full of crap. However, the problem of explaining the success of mesmerism remained, because it was successful with some people. And this puzzle excited more interest, because, some psychologists and people were like, well, there's something to this. Something is going on here. So, they are going to probably look into that a little more. Now, I know a couple of counselors and psychologists who do hypnotherapy. I went to a woman who helped me, regain some of my repressed memories in hypnotherapy. So, and I've seen people quit smoking and, lose a lot of weight and things like that. So, I know that it can work for some people. Now, it's not going to make you balk like a chicken unless you just really want to balk like a chicken. So, those little shows, where they have that going on, sleep. No, that's not really real. Usually, you have to get really impressionable people, if that is going to be real. And 9 times out of 10, I don't think that's the case. So there is real hypnotism, and then there is the show stuff where, that's the thing that they probably took a page out of Mesmer's old book. I'm going to do this thing, that makes the real hypnotists look bad, because, that's all for show. Usually it's for entertainment. And we know, most of us know, the difference between what's real and what's done for entertainment. Nowadays it's getting harder to tell, especially with, AI making these images where it looks real, but you don't know. And sometimes impossible things are impossible. I'll just say that. So, that's where I'm going to leave you for today. Hope that helped you to figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. And that's what this is, an educational program. It's not designed to treat or diagnose any mental illness. If anything I said triggers you, or you felt like it was some problem in your life, please, by all means, talk to your mental health professional. Again, if you would like to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching or listening. That's all for now. Until next time.